The first time I noticed it, the smell hit me before I even saw it. A strange foul odor that seemed to hang in the air, lingering like a shadow. Rook, my loyal German shepherd, was lying on the floor, his usual calm demeanor replaced by something darker. He kept pawing at his ear, shaking his head as if trying to free himself from something unseen. His eyes were wide, the usual gleam replaced by confusion and discomfort. I leaned in closer, concerned, and that's when I saw it, his ear, swollen and red, with a discharge that looked like it came from a nightmare. I could see the pain in his eyes, the way he flinched when I reached out. I knew something was terribly wrong, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. The vet's diagnosis hit me like a slap in the face. An infestation of parasites. They had burrowed deep inside his ear, feeding off him, causing swelling pain and the kind of suffering that no dog should endure. My heart clenched. Rook had been my rock for years, always by my side, protecting me when I needed it most. And now, here he was, suffering in silence, unable to communicate the full extent of his pain. The helplessness was suffocating. I had to act fast, but I had no idea just how far this journey would take us. Rook had always been my constant, my companion through every season of life. His presence filled every room and his energy was contagious. Whether he was by my side while I cooked dinner or curled up at my feet while I worked, he was always there, steady, reliable, and full of life. But one morning, things were different. The house was still unusually quiet as I woke to the soft sound of rain tapping against the window. The grey light of dawn filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows on the floor. I stretched and yawned, reaching out to pat Rook on his usual spot beside the bed, only to find that he wasn't there. Normally, he would be waiting for me to open the door, ready for his morning walk. But not today. The silence was unsettling. I called out his name, expecting the usual burst of excitement that would follow, his claws clicking against the hardwood floor as he bounded to greet me. Instead, I heard a soft rustle from the living room. When I walked in, my heart dropped. Rook was lying in the corner of the room, his body stiff and unmoving. His eyes were wide, but there was something off about them, some unspoken discomfort clouding the usually warm and confident gaze. He didn't jump up when I entered, and that was the first red flag. Rook was never still for long, but this time he just lay there, watching me with an odd expression, his head resting on his paws. I approached him slowly, my stomach knotting. "Rook," I called softly, kneeling down beside. I reached to scratch behind his ears, but when my fingers brushed his fur, he flinched. It was barely perceptible, but it was there. A tremble, a shift in his usual relaxed demeanor. My pulse quickened. His body was tense, not the usual warmth I felt when I touched him. His eyes widened slightly, but he didn't move. I lifted his head gently to check for any signs of injury, expecting a possible scrape or bruise. But what I found instead was something far worse. His ear. The left ear, which had always stood tall and proud, was swollen, discolored, and slick with what appeared to be discharge. It looked as though something had attacked it from the inside, causing the skin to stretch and bulge in unnatural ways. The smell hit me then, a sharp, sickly odor that made my stomach churn. I recoiled instinctively, but the sight was enough to keep me rooted to the spot. I knew something wasn't right. This wasn't just an ear infection or a simple allergy. This was something deeper, something that was causing him not just physical pain, but a complete shift in his behavior. I watched him try to scratch at the ear, his paw digging into it with a frustrated grunt, but his movements were slow, labored. His usual boundless energy was nowhere to be found. He was exhausted, his body drained from whatever was going on inside him. The confusion in his eyes mirrored my own, and I felt a cold lump form in my throat. My heart raced, anxiety beginning to take hold. I had to get him to the vet immediately. The drive to the veterinary clinic was a blur, the world outside slipping past in soft focus as I gripped the wheel tightly, my mind spiraling. I could see him in the rearview mirror, his head resting against the seat, his body tense, every so often shifting in discomfort. His breathing had become shallow, and his usually confident posture was now diminished. He looked defeated, a far cry from the dog who had always been my protector, my rock. I didn't know what I was afraid of. Maybe it was the fear of the unknown, the fear of something worse than what I could see, or worse, the fear of losing him. But I couldn't let that paralyze me. I had to stay strong for him, just as he had always been strong for me. At the clinic, the sterile smell of antiseptic and the low hum of the fluorescent lights did nothing to calm the unease in my chest. The receptionist greeted us with a smile, but I could sense the underlying concern as she quickly ushered us into a room. I sat there with Rook, my hands shaking as I gently stroked his fur. His head rested on my lap, his usual sense of security barely hanging on, as if he was waiting for some sort of relief I couldn't give him. When the vet came in, her face immediately softened at the sight of Rook. She approached him slowly, her hand reaching out to check his ear, and then I saw the real gravity of the situation. Her brow furrowed, and I saw her take a step back. "This is quite severe," she said, her voice calm but laced with concern. "Severe?" I repeated, my heart sinking. "What's happening to him? We'll need to run some tests," she said, avoiding direct eye contact as she examined Rook further. "But from what I'm seeing, it looks like he has an infestation of parasites. There's likely an ear mite infestation that's caused this extreme reaction. It's painful for him, and the discharges from the mites burrowing into the ear canal." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Parasites, ear mites. I had never imagined anything like this. I had no idea that something so small could cause such damage, such pain. It was like a hidden enemy, one that I couldn't even see, but one that was clearly terrorizing my dog. She explained the treatment options, but her words barely registered in my mind. I was too overwhelmed by the knowledge that something so sinister had been growing inside him, something I had failed to notice until it was too late. I watched as the vet gave Rook an injection of pain relief, and my heart ached seeing him finally relax, his body going limp in my lap. The realization settled in slowly, like cold water rising around me. I had failed him. He trusted me to protect him, and I had missed the signs. The guilt gnawed at me as I waited for the results of the tests. All I could do was sit there, my fingers gently tracing the outline of Rook's head, watching him rest peacefully. He deserved better than this. He deserved the strength I had always counted on him to give me. The vet returned with the test results, explaining that the parasites had caused severe irritation and inflammation in his ear. But there was hope. With medication, we could get them under control, and he could recover. I wanted to believe it. I had to. The waiting room felt like a distant world, muffled and suffocating, as though the heavy weight of what we had just learned hung in the air, pressing down on everything. Rook lay on the cool floor next to me, his breathing slow and shallow, his head resting in my lap. I gently ran my fingers through his fur, as though I could somehow soothe the tension that still lingered in his body. The quiet of the room was punctuated by the occasional low murmur of voices from the other side of the door. But to me, it was all distant noise. My world had become centered around one question. How could I have missed this? The diagnosis the vet had given us echoed in my mind like a constant reminder of my failure to protect him. Parasites. It seemed so simple, so invisible, but I felt a deep, aching guilt. I had watched him every day, seen his every movement, and yet somehow the tiny invaders had slipped past my radar, slowly wreaking havoc on the dog I loved so dearly. Every day I had watched Rook, played with him, cared for him, loved him, and yet I hadn't seen the signs. How had I let this happen? Rook had always been a part of the rhythm of my life. His presence was steady and constant, the way his large frame would stretch out beside me as I worked, or how he would look at me with those intelligent eyes, sensing my every mood. He was my protector, my confidant. We had been through so much together. From the time I adopted him, he had become the rock in my life, the one who stayed when the world seemed unstable. And now, I was failing him in the one way that mattered the most, by not seeing the pain he was hiding. The vet's words kept playing in my head as I stroked Rook's head, trying to find some small comfort in the quiet. "Ear mites," she had said. "A simple parasite, but it has caused an extreme reaction. It's painful, and it's affecting more than just his ear. His immune system is responding to the invasion, which is why he's so lethargic and uncomfortable. This is not something that can be ignored." It felt like the world around me had been thrust into slow motion. I could see Rook's eyes, glassy with fatigue and pain, and I saw his trust in me, the trust I had always cherished, begin to flicker, if only for a moment. I could see it in the way he lifted his head slightly when I spoke to him, his ears folding back against the weight of the medication he had received. He was hurting, but he was still here, still trying to comfort me as much as I tried to comfort him. My thoughts were interrupted by the door opening Essay. The vet walked in again, her face softer now, as though she understood the weight of the news she had delivered. The results came back, she said gently. There's good news, and there's bad news. The bad news is that the parasites have caused quite a bit of damage. His ear is badly inflamed, and we'll need to start a course of antibiotics right away. I'll also prescribe a topical ointment to help with the inflammation. I nodded, absorbing the information as best I could. But my mind kept returning to that moment, the moment I had first seen the swelling in Rook's ear and realized something wasn't right. How could I have missed it? I was his caretaker, his protector. It was my responsibility to ensure he was safe, healthy. And yet I had failed to notice the pain he had been in, the subtle signs of something far more dangerous than I could ever have imagined. The vet continued, explaining the steps of the treatment plan, but her voice became background noise as my thoughts spiraled. We'll need to monitor his recovery, she said. It'll take time, but he should make a full recovery. The parasites haven't spread to other areas, and once we clear up the infection, the swelling should go down. Her words should have been reassuring, but they didn't hit me the way they should have. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that everything would be fine, that Rook would return to his old self. But the guilt gnawed at me, and I couldn't shake the fear that this wasn't enough. The vet handed me a packet of medications, along with clear instructions on how to administer them. I nodded mechanically, my mind still racing. I was relieved that Rook would recover, but the lingering doubts, could I handle this? Was I doing enough? Flooded my thoughts. I reached down and gently stroked Rook's head once again, my fingers trembling as I felt his fur beneath my hand. His breathing was slower now, more even. He looked up at me, and there was a softness in his eyes, a trust that I knew I couldn't break. As we left the clinic, the cool night air hit me like a wall, snapping me out of my thoughts. I kept my hand on Rook's back as we walked, feeling the tension in his body slowly begin to fade, even if only a little. He was still with me, still walking by my side, and that alone was a small comfort. I had always taken his health for granted, always assumed that he would be the strong one, the unshakable presence in my life. Now, I realized that strength wasn't just in his physical abilities. It was in his ability to trust me even when things were at their worst. It was in his resilience. That night, as I sat beside Rook, watching him sleep more soundly than he had in days, I felt a shift in me. The fear, the guilt, the uncertainty, they hadn't vanished, but they had taken a backseat to something far more powerful, determination. I was going to do whatever it took to help him recover. I wasn't going to fail him again. The following days felt like a blur. Rook had always been the dog I relied on for companionship and strength, yet now it was my turn to be the one holding him together. I couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness as I watched him struggle with the treatment. Every morning I administered his medication, applied the ointment to his ear, and did my best to ease his discomfort. But no matter how carefully I followed the vet's instructions, the reality of watching Rook in pain was something I hadn't anticipated. His usual energy was replaced with lethargy. The steroids the vet had prescribed were supposed to calm his immune response, but they made him drowsy and restless. I could tell he wasn't happy, but he wasn't the type of dog to show much outward distress unless it was overwhelming. His body was stiff from the inflammation, and I could see the discomfort in the way he moved, as though every step took effort. The once fluid grace in his gait was gone, replaced by slow, deliberate movements that made my heart ache with every pause. I tried to keep our daily routines as normal as possible. I took him outside for walks, though they were much slower than before. Rook wasn't sprinting through the yard, chasing after sticks or running alongside me. He was walking with careful steps, every movement measured, and yet I saw the flicker of hope in his eyes each time we made it a few feet farther. He trusted me, he always had, and I couldn't let him down. One afternoon, as we sat together on the porch, I could feel the tension in my body start to dissolve. The cool breeze had picked up, rustling the leaves around us, and Rook rested his head on my knee, looking up at me with that quiet, unwavering loyalty that he always carried. The soft sunlight bathed us in a warm glow, and for a brief moment I felt like we had escaped the pain of the world. But it didn't last long. Rook's eyes were becoming dull again, and his appetite had started to wane. He'd always been such a strong eater, never turning down a meal, but now food was a struggle. Each time I placed his bowl in front of him, he would sniff it, give it a cursory glance, and then walk away. It wasn't just the lack of interest that worried me. It was the effort it took for him to move, the way he hesitated, like his body was betraying him. I tried to coax him with his favorite treats, but even those didn't seem to spark his usual excitement. His weight had started to drop, and with it, my worry began to grow. There were moments when I wondered if the medication was too much for him, or if the parasites had done irreparable damage. What if I was causing more harm than good? What if, despite everything I did, he didn't get better? These thoughts crept into my mind like a slow tide, relentless in their rising force, pushing against my resolve. But then, one evening, something shifted. I was sitting on the floor of the living room, lost in thought when I heard it, a small sound barely noticeable at first. Rook was standing by the door, his eyes fixed on the outside, his tail giving the faintest of wags. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He was standing, not leaning against the wall for support, but standing on his own, his back legs firm beneath him. He hadn't done that in days. I rushed over to him, my heart pounding in my chest. "Rook," I whispered, kneeling beside him. His gaze met mine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a spark in his eyes, something more than just weariness, something that resembled the dog I had known. It wasn't the same energy he had before, but it was a beginning. Without thinking, I opened the door and stepped outside, Rook following closely behind me. His steps were slow at first, unsure, but then, gradually, he found his rhythm. We didn't run, we didn't race across the yard like we used to, but we walked together, side by side, one step at a time. I could feel the weight of his body against mine, the steady pressure of his shoulder brushing against me as we moved forward. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was a sign of progress, however small, and I clung to it. I held on to that moment, letting it fuel my determination. We were getting through this. Together, later that evening after our walk, I sat down beside him on the couch. I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, but there was also something else, something more subtle, more hopeful. He rested his head on my lap, letting out a soft sigh. His breathing had slowed, his body relaxing into the comfort of the moment. He trusted me, as always, to make everything okay. But now, I realized it wasn't just about the physical treatments. It was about this moment. This time we spent together, even in the midst of pain and uncertainty. It was healing, too. That night, as I watched him sleep peacefully beside me, I made a vow to him. I wouldn't give up. No matter how hard this became, no matter how much doubt crept into my heart, I would fight for him. I would help him heal, just as he had always been there for me. I would give him everything he needed, every ounce of strength I had until he was whole again. It was a battle I knew. The road ahead would not be easy, but I had never seen Rook back down from a fight, and neither would I. It wasn't until the 5th day of the treatment that I truly began to feel a shift in the air. The days before had been filled with a relentless sense of waiting, the clock ticking slower than it ever had before, each minute stretching out like a lifetime. But as I watched Rook today, there was something different in the way he moved, an energy I hadn't seen in him for weeks. It was subtle, just a small flicker of light, but it was enough to make me believe that the battle was turning in our favor. I had just finished preparing his medication for the day, sitting on the floor beside him as I opened the small vial of antibiotics. He was resting in his bed, his body still, as he often was after the medication had taken its toll. But when I placed the pills in his mouth, something in him responded differently. Instead of the usual disinterest, the slow, reluctant swallowing, I saw him perk up just a little, his ears lifting, his gaze meeting mine. It wasn't much, but it was progress, and after everything, I clung to that progress with all my strength. That afternoon, I took him outside for the first time since the initial flare-up of his condition. We had been walking together every day since the vet's diagnosis, but today, it was different. There was a lightness in his steps that hadn't been there before. His movements were still cautious, hesitant even, but there was an unmistakable energy in the way he held his head. He wasn't dragging his body anymore. His stride was measured but confident. I watched him take his first few steps into the yard, the grass damp from the morning dew, the air cool and fresh with the scent of rain. The light was gentle, filtering through the trees in golden beams, casting long shadows across the ground. Rook's fur glistened faintly in the sunlight as he slowly moved forward, his eyes scanning the yard for anything that might catch his attention. We didn't rush. There was no need. We were in this together, moving at our own pace, as we had done so many times before. But this time, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, a sense of quiet hope that we were slowly, surely getting back to where we needed to be. As we walked, Rook stopped for a moment, sniffing at the air, his body still tense but his eyes full of curiosity. The world was opening up to him again. "A good boy," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "We're getting there." The healing process had never been easy, and I knew that we weren't out of the woods yet. The road ahead was still uncertain, but the light at the end of the tunnel had finally started to appear. Rook was still weak, still recovering, but he was showing signs that he was ready to fight, ready to return to the life we had shared before this all started. As we made our way around the yard, I saw him pause again, his body trembling slightly, as if the effort of the walk had taken more from him than he was willing to admit. But instead of retreating to the safety of his bed, he turned to me and looked up. His gaze was full of quiet determination, as if he was telling me, "I'm not giving up." And in that moment, I knew we were past the worst of it. Rook was fighting, and so was I. We sat together on the porch that afternoon, Rook resting his head in my lap once again, his body still exhausted but his spirit stronger than it had been just days ago. I looked down at him, stroking his fur gently, feeling the soft rise and fall of his breath beneath my fingers. My fingers. I had seen the weariness in his eyes, felt the tension in his body, but I had also seen the quiet resilience that had always defined him. The strength in his heart, the same strength that had kept him by my side through thick and thin, was returning. The rain began to fall softly, and I closed my eyes for a moment, allowing the sound of it to wash over us. The world felt quiet, peaceful. The struggles of the past few days seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the steady rhythm of Rook's breathing and the distant patter of the rain. There was something incredibly grounding about it, about simply sitting there with him, sharing this moment of stillness after everything we had been through. "I'm sorry," I whispered to him, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have known something was wrong." Rook lifted his head slightly, his eyes meeting mine. His expression was gentle, understanding. He didn't need me to explain. He knew that I would never willingly let him suffer, and that was enough. The bond between us, the trust we shared, was deeper than words could express. That night, as Rook curled up on his bed, I sat beside him, my hand resting lightly on his back. The rain continued outside, its steady rhythm a lullaby that seemed to calm both of us. I reflected on the past few days. The fear, the uncertainty, the doubts that had clouded my mind, and I realized how far we had come. Rook wasn't just recovering physically, he was healing emotionally too. He had shown me what it meant to trust, to endure, and to fight with everything you had. I had learned that healing didn't come all at once. It came in small moments, in small victories, and I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, moments when his body would falter or when his spirit would waver. But we had already faced the hardest part together. We had battled through the darkness, and now we were moving into the light. As I watched Rook settle into a peaceful sleep, I knew one thing for sure. I would never stop fighting for him. Just as he had been there for me, I would be there for him every step of the way. Together we would heal. He would heal. Together we would move forward. The weeks that followed felt like a gradual unfolding, the steady return of something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Peace. Rook's recovery was slow, but with every day, it felt like the weight that had settled so heavily on our lives was lifting just a little bit more. I had spent so much of my time worrying, second-guessing every decision I made, wondering if I was doing enough for him. But now, I realized that healing wasn't just about medications or treatments. It was about the quiet moments we shared, the bond we had cultivated through everything we had endured. The mornings had become our time to reconnect, to breathe deeply, and to begin the day with intention. The simple act of walking him outside, as we did every morning, had become a ritual of sorts. Rook would still start slowly, his body stiff from the aftermath of everything, but there was a certain determination in the way he moved now. He wasn't running yet, not with the same abandon he once had, but his movements were deliberate and strong. His head was up, his eyes sharper, more aware of the world around him. The pain had dulled, and with it, his spirit had begun to shine through once more. I remember the first time he pulled me towards the old path near the edge of the yard, the one we used to walk together when the sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon. It wasn't much, but it felt like a small victory. He led the way, just as he had done countless times before. I followed behind, smiling as I watched him sniff at the grass, his tail slowly wagging with each new discovery. The familiar scent of damp earth and grass filled the air, the world around us quiet, except for the soft chirp of birds in the trees. It was a moment of normalcy, a reminder that even though we had been through something incredibly difficult, there was still a life for us to share, a life that was full of these small, beautiful moments. At first, I was hesitant to let him go at his own pace, to trust him fully to his own recovery. But as I watched him, I realized something. I didn't need to be afraid anymore. Rook had always been the one to pull me through my darkest moments, to offer his unwavering loyalty and comfort. And now, it wasn't just about me taking care of him anymore. It was about us healing together, about finding strength in one another. There were still setbacks, of course. There were days when the pain would return, and I could see it in the way Rook moved. His body would stiffen, and he would retreat to his bed, eyes dull with exhaustion. On those days I stayed close, offering comfort without words. I would sit beside him, my hand resting lightly on his back, feeling the steady rhythm of his breath beneath my fingers. I had learned that healing didn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it was about being present, simply being there for each other. One afternoon, we sat outside, the warmth of the sun soaking into the earth, the quiet rustle of leaves overhead. Rook lay beside me, his body stretched out across the grass, his head resting in my lap. The soft breeze played with his fur, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I felt a sense of peace. There was no rush, no sense of urgency. For the first time since everything had started, I wasn't watching the clock, counting the hours or days. I was simply enjoying the moment, enjoying the stillness and the quiet healing that was taking place between us. I could feel Rook's trust growing stronger with each passing day, just as mine did. He had always been the rock in my life, the one I leaned on when everything else felt uncertain. And now, as he rested against me, I realized that I had been his rock too. His recovery was not just about physical healing. It was about us growing together, learning to navigate this new phase of our lives with patience and love. It was on one of these afternoons, as I sat with him by my side, that I realized just how much we had both changed. Rook's body had healed, the once swollen ear now only a faint memory of the battle it had endured. But the emotional healing was something more profound. We had been through the storm together, facing the unknown, fighting against the fear and uncertainty, and we had come out on the other side, stronger and more connected than before. The bond we shared was no longer just about companionship. It was about survival, resilience, and the unspoken promise to always be there for each other. I had witnessed Rook's strength in the face of pain, his willingness to trust me even when he didn't understand what was happening to him, and in turn I had learned to trust him. I had learned to trust that no matter what came next, we would face it together. I had come to understand that healing wasn't a linear process. It wasn't something that could be rushed or controlled. It took time, patience, and above all, trust. As the days passed, I saw more of the old Rook emerging. It's as though he started playing again, his body more agile, his tail wagging with the same enthusiasm he had once had. He ran through the yard, his movements no longer stiff, his energy returning in full force. I watched him chase after a ball I had thrown, and for the first time I felt the weight of everything we had been through start to lift. He wasn't just running for the sake of it. He was running because he could. He was running because he had fought through the pain and come out on the other side. And as I watched him, I realized something else. It wasn't just his body that had healed. It was his spirit. The quiet resilience, the trust he had placed in me, had brought us both through the hardest part of our journey. The road ahead might still have its challenges, but I knew now that we were ready. Together we were stronger. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, I sat back against the porch, Rook's head resting once again in my lap. He was breathing deeply now, his body relaxed in the way only a dog who feels completely safe can be. The bond between us had been tested, stretched to its limits, but it had endured. The journey had changed us both, but in the best way possible. We had learned that healing was not just about physical recovery, it was about coming together, about trusting in each other's strength and love. And as I looked down at him, I knew that no matter what came next, we would face it together. Because that was what we did. We healed together.